Today we have the panelists here. We have Al Etheridge, founder of Atlanta Patent Services. We have Iad Van Ingen, who is CEO and co-founder of Focus. We have Jitin Talwar, who is founder of TT Consultant and ExcelPat. We have Pratik Mohanta, who is COO at Sagacious Research. We have Steve Harris, CTO at Cypher, and Tony, who is managing director at Pat Informatics. And my name is Madhav Kulkarni. I'm intellectual capital manager at Dow, and I will be moderating this discussion on patent analytics, current and future. And as we see, the team here represents the end users of patent information, service providers of patent information, that search and analytics, and tools providers for patent search and analytics. And we are going to discuss this patent analytics, current and future. So let's start with another basic question just to understand, how we have come so far, maybe in last decade. So how the patent analytics have changed in the last decade? What is the current state of the patent analytics from the end user side? So maybe listen to the perspectives of Tony, Pratik, and Al here.
So Tony Trippi, Patent Informatics. Yes, it's been really fascinating to watch the development of both patent analytics and now machine learning and the impact it's having on machine learning. So 25 years ago or so, maybe, most of the people that I would associate with were considered patent searchers. And so that was the primary focus of the industry at the time is the search and retrieval. And I came along on the scene and said, well, look, I think there's going to be a sea change, as it were, and it's going to become more about analytics, more about adding insight and value to the process. And so I started to stump or to advocate, lobby for the patent searchers should be doing a lot more because that was where their real value was going to be discovered, and it was going to be appreciated by their organizations. And within the last 2 years, I found myself with a sense of deja vu, in the sense that another sea change is upon our industry, and that sea change is that with regards to the impact of machine learning. And so to help with that, I've developed a website, Machine Learning for Patents. There's other places in this conference where you can learn about that, so I won't necessarily be speaking much about it here. But I'm completely convinced that it's going to revolutionize the way we do our work. And just more recently, just very, very recently, is this idea that there's a difference between recall and precision when you're working with building collections and patents. And there's been quite a few developments over the years. There's lots of different ways to increase recall. And some would argue that recall in a Boolean sense is actually fairly reasonable. It's not that difficult to build a big, broad query and get very, very high recall. The real challenge is in precision. And the real challenge is then how do you then take that high recall set and get it to so that it's also high precision. And recently we're getting more and more providers that are offering more and more options for doing some form of classification, even if it's simply binary classification, which essentially says relevant, not relevant, which it speaks directly to high precision. And I have to say, I mean, just within the last year, I've seen 4 new tools that are addressing that exact issue. The idea of categorization or binary classification for relevance. And that's really going to save each and every one of us a tremendous amount of time. So that's what I would say as far as what we're seeing with regards to the recent past and immediate present.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Tony. So let's move on to Pratik to understand his perspective, what his clients want, and how the expectations have changed in last decade.
Yeah, so this is Pratik. I'm the CEO at Sagacious. To put in my perspective from being a service provider in terms of what kind of things that I see from my clients today. 10 years back or so, patent landscape were mostly about bulky, Excel files and PowerPoint presentations depicting patent-related trends with some analysis on taxonomy and stuff like that. But the clients have actually now moved forward and are looking to generate analytics and insights, from a combination of IP data points, like, maybe litigation information, maybe financial information, market related information. Also, the use cases that they're coming up with, the clients that they want, have now become a lot more specific. Earlier, they used to be a lot generic in nature, but now they are very specific, asking specific questions about new application areas for a specific technology, new markets to enter, asking questions that assist in making, merger and acquisition decisions, or, identifying any new disruptive technology as soon as it becomes available in their domain. So these specific use cases require analytics that goes a lot more than basic searching. And as Tony mentioned, it needs that intelligence to sort of identify and take out that insight from a whole lot of data points that are available. So that's where I think we should be heading towards in terms of analytics, and that's exactly what the requirements are, because they need quick turnarounds, they need these specific answers. So any intelligence, any sort of help that we can get from tools would be of amazing value to any search provider and also to the end clients.
Thank you, Pratik. So let's move to Al and see and understand, where are we now, and what are you trying to accomplish, that is not there.
I'm Al Etheridge, and I'm the founder and CEO of Atlanta Patent Services. And to mirror both what Anthony and Pratik already said, we are at a second sea change point in the way that we go about our work in terms of analytics and presentation of it. What I see is there are a diversity of wonderful tools that are competing for success in different types of applications that we might provide, whether it be landscape or a more strategic type of offering, for example, that integrates many different types of information. And these diversity of tools, I think, serve different needs very effectively in different ways. And so externally, as a service provider, and not one that is developing these tools, at a certain level, I'm waiting to see who the technology winners will be for certain areas and which sorts of algorithms and methods will be the most successful. And so the challenge here is being able to sample them readily and effectively in ways to see how well they will be useful for my clients. But it's a very exciting time to do that. The challenge for me is the black box challenge in many ways, particularly with lawyers and often with corporate entities as well. They're very reluctant to trust something that they don't understand. And this model, AI and machine learning, is difficult to understand. It's complex. I do trust it in many ways, but being able to have the client feel that the control over the inputs, to Tony's point, the precision and the accuracy of the search results are going to serve their needs, particularly for lawyers who are literally putting their career and their reputation behind these analytics. They're very, very reluctant to just rely upon what they perceive as a black box. So there's an educational aspect to this that's very important to me, to satisfy my clients and give them confidence in the results that do come out of the AI models and the machine learning models. We have the rare opportunity to analyze as much data as we care to, as quickly as we want to, and the garbage in, garbage out model applies here as well. So being able to effectively structure inputs to achieve the right outputs that meet the client's needs and data in the way that they anticipate and is useful for them it's not so much of a technical challenge right now, it's an application challenge, but that's what I see a little bit on the client end, and what I'm working towards, to try to hold hands between those that are developing AI products and those that use them. And so that's what I would like to see going forward.
Thanks, Al. So let's hear from Jitin, Steve, and Yard as a tools providers and their perspective on how have we come to this state in last 10 years. So let's start with Jitin.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Jitin Talwar. I'm one of the founders of ExcelPat. We've also worked towards founding a service providing company. So that's where we got most of our context from. So I would like to kind of club the latest developments in three areas. One is, basically AI, the reader, which also includes AI using and to use AI in analytics. The second is AI in patent offices. They're also consumers of data and new applications. And third, of course, is a futuristic, however, very relevant business model that relates to AI, the creator. So there are strides which are kind of being made in all three of them. Um, the in as far as the first model of AI, the reader is concerned, the underlying technology is essentially natural language processing. However, the game changer is when there is machine learning which gets applied to the natural language processing, and we've seen at least about a 50 to 65% improvement when it comes to different models which get applied when it's applied when machine learning and user learning is applied onto natural language processing. So in as far as AI at the patent offices is concerned, we've seen the Indian Patent Office move towards AI. There was a big tender. We are actually participating in that and working towards that. There are also AI which is being used in different patent offices on classification. And then last but not the least, AI the reader or AI the creator. That is where doing inventors, machine being inventors, or actually writing, at least starting to write first parts of the claim, or writing, some parts of the specification is concerned. That would come in with large trained data sets, including GPT, BERT models, etc., being concerned. So I believe that we are just at the start of this big revolution, and the clean big data sets that we have for both patents and publications will lead to a sea change in practical applications when it comes to use cases in clients, both companies, government, as well as law firms.
Thank you, Jitin. Yeah, let's move on to Steve to understand his perspective here. Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Harris. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Cypher. So, I mean, if you look at where we've come in 10 years, it's quite a dramatic shift. I mean, 10 years ago, there was no significant deployment of ML in the patent world, certainly nothing commercially available. And the state of the art in landscaping was, as Tony said earlier, a Boolean search followed by a manual review. And so things have come along massively in the last 10 years. We've now got huge numbers of companies relying on ML technologies for their landscaping and using purely ML without human review to drive the results. So I think it's kind of unrecognizable how far we've come.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear from Yard.
Hi, my name is Jörg Vonninga. I'm the CEO of Focus. 10 years ago, 1 decade ago, I was 18 years old, and therefore I was not thinking about patent analytics all that much. But I mean, I can look at the state of some tools today or where they have moved, and I can definitely see a direction that they've taken. And of course, what Steve has just mentioned is absolutely true. It's completely incomparable. What I do think is interesting about what Al said, and also what Tony said earlier, is whatever you try to do, whatever kind of analytics you try to do, of course, it all starts with recall and precision, right? First, we need patent data before we can analyze it and visualize it and come to interesting conclusions about what the data might tell us. And to be able to analyze it in a meaningful way, to Al's point, it depends on the circumstances of the end user. And therefore, we think it is crucial that you have a machine learning infrastructure wherein you can teach the algorithm about your circumstances. Because no matter how good language models get, no matter how fancy the algorithms are that you will deploy, without those models having the ability to learn about the context within which a search is taking place, to learn about the situation that the end user is in, it is almost impossible to come up with an automatically generated a usable category for that end user. So we think going forward, supervision, whether it is fully supervised or semi-supervised, is essential.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for your perspectives on how we have developed with respect to patent analytics in last 10 years. So now trying to understand here more from the end user or service provider's perspective. What are the expectations of your clients or end users or yourself as a service providers here? I believe AI and ML is there or coming there to save lots of time and efforts in the analytics that we have spent. Like Pratik said, it is not a huge Excel file that we need to analyze. The computer is going to do that for us, and then at the same time add some value to the output that we generate, right? So let's understand from Al, Pratik, and Tony as end users or service providers as to what are their expectations of from AI and ML. So let's start with Al.
Sure. I fall into the camp of semi-supervised models. I'm a believer that in order to maintain the precision you want for the clients in an ever-changing deliverable environment, being able to tailor the inputs according to these changing needs is important. For my clients, at least, the ability to control some of those inputs for them is a very important aspect. Again, back to the black box, not to harp on that, but dispelling that concern from my clients is a challenge for me right now. And it's outside of the technical challenges that the providers here are really doing a great job to service. As far as how to add value to the outcome of the user, I really do like the models that have been expressed by some of the corporations here, in that applying sort of strategic meta tags and the like to different strategic or technology options provides you the ability to sort of longitudinally across a strategic or through a strategic effort or across a technology area, start building up data, building up a large data set and sort of training a better and bigger beholden model for your own needs. And that is of great interest to me. I'm seeing these tools emerge now and trying desperately to learn how to use them most effectively. But what I really want to do is climb as far up the chain with AI and ML to where there is still an expert application of the capital I human intelligence at the end of the day that can resolve these sort of intangible things within a project that might involve, heck, personalities or corporate interests or various other strategic elements that aren't fully or well captured within the confines of patent or litigation space. And that's where the capital I intelligence, I think, is still required in this process. But it's the minimization of the grind, the getting to the last 5%, that you only need to apply the last 5% of intelligence there and let the ML and the AI do the rest of the work effectively. And I think we're reaching a stage right now where they're starting to become very effective in those areas. And I feel I'm readily able to maybe not get to 5%, but get much, much closer than I could ever get with Boolean without the highly iterative and mess of spreadsheets that ultimately come out of that. And on the back end, I look forward to the development of continuing development of UI and UX as the output for AIs. My sense is that the people developing the AI technologies spend so much time solving a super difficult problem. It's difficult to get to the UI and the UX compared to the other providers in Boolean that have been here for 20 or 30 years that are focused almost exclusively there at this point. That's how they try to differentiate, I think, in a lot of cases. So I think, boy, it's as exciting to me as the advent of the computer itself or as the internal combustion engine in this field. And it's learning how to operate and utilize these things in the most effective way, these new powerful tools that I look forward to taking advantage of most in the future.
Great, thank you. Pratik?
Right. So yeah, Al actually captured that beautifully, and I agree. I also am currently on that same, uh, position where it's sort of semi-supervised usage of tools that we are doing right now. Because overall, what I find is that in terms of visualizations, in terms of even the analysis at a very higher level is pretty accurate, or accurate in terms of acceptably accurate. But the moment you go down into a little bit of a micro analysis or go down to the next level, that's where the problems start happening, because a lot of tools out there still rely on classifications and stuff like classification codes. AI and ML are not really applicable. They have not at least been applied there, at least to for me to being able to trust them completely on that. So that is an area where I think they need to work forward on, and sort of so that the human intervention that's there, that can be reduced on that, and we focus more on the value addition that can be brought into the insights and the analytics. Also, one other thing that I think is the tools, in order to become more popular right now, they are focused a lot on IP professionals. But we're talking about landscapes and we're talking about strategic decision making. The tools need to be structured in a way that you end up sort of involving other people who are outside this IP's intellectual property domain, from institutes, from people in the strategy department of different companies, for them to be able to use these tools, not be very IP focused. That's when the real horizons will actually get broadened, and there will be more users for such tools like that. And I think as we go down into micro analysis with ML and AI becoming a lot better, I think this should help both service providers and the client and the end clients, because the final objective is to reduce the cost and get better insight. So that's the direction that we should move forward to as human intervention sort of reduces.
Thank you, Pratik. Yeah, let's hear from Tony.
So I'll come at this from a slightly different angle. So for instance, looking historically at this field, and there was the very early use of machine learning in what I'll refer to as a particular type of visualization that I call spatial concept mapping. Everyone has seen them. The trademark for a particular vendor is referred to as a theme. At the end of the day, this is a unsupervised machine learning method for clustering documents and then using an nth space dimensional model in order to visualize it. It's machine learning through and through. And it's been around for a very, very long time. But it had a lot of issues in the sense that as it was being rolled out to, for lack of a better term, an end user, they really weren't trained very well, and the people that were helping them get up to speed on it weren't doing a particularly good job of understanding how to use that system and what sort of inputs they had. And so it becomes sort of classic black box that Al has referred to. And quite frankly, there were a lot of maps that were created that really weren't worth very much, were difficult to interpret, and certainly didn't provide much in the way of insight. So the reason I bring that up is because that's where I think it's important for analysts to be involved. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for end user work in this. There certainly is. That was demonstrated very clearly with SciFinder, for instance, from Chemical Abstracts more than 20 years ago. They did an excellent job of building a tool that served a particular need and answered questions that were going unasked. So they were very, very clear about the way they put that tool together and how it would work, and it was fabulous. So what I did recently, or actually it was a year or two ago, is I broke down patent analytics into its component parts based on the work that I did with WIPO to put together the guidelines for preparing patent landscape reports. there's a step-by-step process that's outlined in that particular document. So I asked the question, where would I apply machine learning to each and every one of those? And so what it did is it brought to light the idea that there were a lot of different instances that machine learning could have a profound impact. But the bottom line is at the end of the day, and Al, I think, alluded to this, or said it quite specifically, actually, and so that insight doesn't come from a single glance. It doesn't come from one piece of evidence. Insight traditionally comes from what I refer to as a mosaic, that there are many different inputs, there are many different analyses, there are many different views. And as you begin to see the overlap between these views, that's where you begin to build confidence that it's a true insight. It's not an outlier. It's not a consequence of how you design the system to start with. It's actually an insight because you verified it from a couple of different sources. And so the ability to do that more rapidly. And again, I think that's a key theme that lots of people have talked about, that once upon a time that might have taken weeks or even months to put together that sort of a comprehensive overview and analysis, and coming at a problem from different directions in order to feel confident that what you're putting out in front of your client is in fact highly likely to be relevant and truthful. That has all changed because now we can do that much more quickly than we could in the past.
Yeah, so as end users or service providers, I think we want the computers to use AI and ML, save lots of time that we otherwise would spend on manual analysis, and provide some insights and add value to the output. Yeah, I think that's well summarized. So now the question would go to now Jitin and Steve, that based on these expectation, what do you think? What is possible? What is not possible? How the future of patent analytics looks like with what we have at this moment? Would the analysis really change with the context of the analysis? Say we may be looking for product today, process tomorrow, composition day after tomorrow, and so on. So is it really possible to get this kind of mosaic, even changing every day, depending upon the need of the end user, and do we really see kind of the uh, diverging search and converging analysis at the end of the day? And I think that is something that is going to reduce time and add value to the output. So let's start with Yard.
Yeah, this is exactly the approach that we take at Focus. So we believe that artificial intelligence or machine learning ought to be your workhorse. So you are still by far the most intelligent party when it comes to ML and you as a human. So your expertise ought to be leveraged by machine learning, and you shouldn't be in the charge or in service, I mean, of the box. It should be exactly the other way around. And as to what you said, like one day you're interested in a process, the next day you're interested in a product, another day you're interested in applications of that product. And if you pay attention to that, the only thing that changed is your circumstances. Nothing has changed about the patents. Nothing has changed about the patent data. No matter how good the natural language processing models that we apply to that patent data are, the only thing that has changed is your circumstances. So it is absolutely essential that machine learning, patent analytics tools providers have some sort of method in their tool that allows for the end user to train the system what they are interested in. There's simply no way that the tool can know what results are relevant to you without any sort of training beforehand. So yes, what we try to do is we give the end user the ability to label examples of what they're interested in, whether it is a process, an application, whatever it is, as long as you can label it, the machine will then abstract from that what it is that you're interested in. And then the workhorse part of it is that you can let it loose on whatever information or whatever scope of patents you're interested in. And then it can go and do the hard work of matching and figuring out whether or not that patent belongs to what you have told it to look for.
Thank you. Jitin?
I wanted to flag what Al has said, as well as what Tony was mentioning. Making the end user, and also what you said, Madhav, making the end user as the centerpiece of the solution is how one designs the solutions. One, the systems that take away or that claim to take away the job of the end user are by first principle never going to succeed. It's only folks who will utilize those tools and leverage them, and tools that work with the user to make sure that the job is more efficiently done is what we look to develop as developers. And second is, of course, if you're punting your job on it, it's got to be explainable. So the explainability behind it, and then if you're then taking it to your boss or to the business or to the R&D and saying, this is what my conclusion is, you better the tool that you're relying on or relying upon better provide that input. Or then you venture into areas where it's just not possible for human to go into, and only an abstract machine algorithm can get into. So that's the second part of it. The other aspect of this is, again, keeping the human in mind, look at end-to-end solutions. So as developers, we look at end-to-end solutions on each aspect of what the end user is working on. So for example, an IP department on an average has 7 or 8 different functions, and look at each of the 7 or 8 different functions and see where automation can be implemented, where ML can be implemented. And the third, of course, is creating sustainable business models so that the compute and the business are able to then sustain in the longer run and coexist with the inputs of the user and get better with the inputs of the user. So those are things that we look at.
Thank you, Jitin. Yeah, Steve, your opinion?
Yes, I mean, all the things that we've been talking about, those are things that we deliver for our clients today. Mapping patents to products, materials, processes, all of those things. And you're absolutely right that the context is critical. So we normally have so Cypher only works off fully supervised models, largely to avoid the kinds of problems that Al's talking about with black boxes, because a fully supervised system is not a black box. Because you can see all the data that it's using to make its decisions and figure out how it's come to them. But the reason why you're doing that is critical, and it often falls down on those lines of, if you're trying to do a portfolio optimization, for example, then you need to be able to map patents to products. Whereas if you're doing a benchmarking exercise, then more typically you'd be trying to map to technology so that you can compare your portfolio to competitor portfolios along technology lines. So the context is absolutely critical. I also want to say a little bit about the sort of efficiency and time aspect, because obviously the main win from ML technology, if you look at it as a sort of very hard-nosed technological solution, is that it's delivering efficiency. It's reducing manpower on these kind of very mundane, hard work, low value tasks. But in doing that, it actually opens up new capabilities for people. You've got things where the technically speaking, all it's doing is reducing the effort. But if you were trying to do it manually, people just straight up can't afford to do it. It's just the amount of manpower involved is far too great. And things like portfolio optimization is a great example of that. To do a good job of that, you've got to categorize every patent owned by all of your competitors and then align it to revenue data. And it's just not possible to do that by hand. There's a handful of companies do that, but it's really prohibitively expensive. So although from a technical perspective, it's reducing time and effort, from the point of view of the end users, it's actually giving them a capability they didn't have before.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So now we are discussing about actually analyzing this patent data, and then obviously it's a huge number, right? Millions of patent records that we need to really analyze, at least tens of thousands if we choose a particular domain to analyze. So are there challenges with this patent data? And then as I understand, there is this general AI, and then there is a narrow AI. And then now, because now we are not looking at like at Google Analytics, we are looking at like patent analytics here. And then is this really a kind of a relatively narrow AI that we are looking at? And then how easy or difficult is to train models for patent data? Steve?
So so pattern classification sort of falls somewhere in the middle of the difficulty range, which is largely why these technologies only started emerging kind of 7 or 8 years ago. If you compare it to something like driving an autonomous car, it's much easier, but then compared to something like machine translation, it's much more challenging. But it's not really a question of whether we have the technical ability to do it. It's just about the economics. So the companies are willing to throw billions of dollars at building a system that can drive a car because the economic rewards from that are massive, whereas the economic rewards from classifying patents are not so great. So it doesn't justify that kind of investment. To give you some idea, training a BERT model on patent data costs on the order of $250,000, and you've got to do that once or twice a year. So we're talking quite a large budget, but it's not implausible. And in terms of the specificity, you can obviously treat patents just as text documents and use an off-the-shelf NLP system. We started out by doing that early on as some experiments, but what we discovered was the levels of accuracy just weren't anywhere close to what you get from a patent searcher. So we built our own specialized models that deal specifically with the vagaries of patent data, dealing with citations and the sort of the English language or whatever language that the patent's written in. It's kind of not a straightforward. It's not a straightforward use of the language. It's kind of quite specialized towards the legal domain and patents specifically, which is why you need these custom embeddings in order to do a good job. So for sure, I think any point in the next 10 years, any system that does well on patent data will be highly specialized, and maybe some future version of kind of like the BERT system, but 10 versions on, might well be able to cope with general purpose English and patent English at once. But the technology today doesn't allow that.
Okay, yeah. So let's hear from Jitin.
Again, it's all a question of return of investment, as one of the other speakers was saying. You can train systems. They can be very expensive. You can use billions and billions of data set, instances of data sets, train systems for a small little improvement in accuracy. So I'll give you an example. We started with first pass invalidator. Now, that, okay, let's find invalidating art using automation, right? Now, for that to be successful and fully reliable, somebody would eventually have to invest their entire litigation based upon results of an automated solution, right? we understood it very early on in the game that that is not going to happen. So you've got to start, selling that as a first pass and not like a complete solution. So drawing the line uh, on where the human will then rely upon the system is very important, and complete reliance on this on a model, whatever it is something that you know is something that's very far-fetched as we move forward. Making that as a decision-making aid, making that as a as an aid where you're able to work on it for a consistent period of time and use that for the benefit of your company and faster delivery for your of stuff that was hitherto not possible is what we've learned as being possible.
Yeah, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a slightly different approach because everything that Stephen Jitin have said makes perfect sense, especially what Steve said for classifying patent data. You need a more specialized sort of model, but that's all back-end stuff. From the user perspective, it is as simple as clicking which patents are relevant and which patents are irrelevant to your particular circumstances. So once you've got a model that can deal with all the intricacies of patent data reliably, for the user it's really simple. You just click, yes, no, relevant, irrelevant, and then you click train. And you do that for a few iterations until the machine has sufficiently understood what you're after, and you then let it loose, and it will retrieve all the patents for you that it has been told to retrieve based on your training input. As to data quality, because that was the second part of your question, patent data is pretty tricky in that regard because it's not necessarily very clean, and you have to figure out all sorts of clever ways to deal with that. But patent professionals or patent tool provided professionals have been thinking about those issues, of course, for a while now, and I feel like in most cases, we've come up with good solutions to the data quality issues. But of course, in the end, we rely on what we get from the patent offices, and there's all sorts of ways you can clean that data. But there will always be issues in specific documents that are just bad data. So. And there's no real way around that.
Okay, thank you, Yard. So now moving back to Tony, Yard, and Al, and do you see AI and ML doing the search and analysis on its own, or would we go for semi-supervised model? So can we compare a Boolean and manual search versus semi or fully automated one? So we start with Tony.
So this is what I think has really been eye-opening, is that Boolean searching is really not all that great when it comes right down to it, especially the way most people do it, with a handful of keywords and no real iterative process. I can't tell you the number of searches I've seen that were done that way. Under those circumstances, I guarantee you that even an unsupervised machine learning model is going to do a far better job. There's really no questioning it. Our esteemed colleagues in the data science field and the information retrieval field have been telling us that for a decade. So I don't think that there's really any doubt about that. Again, I'm a big fan of the supervised or semi-supervised approach. But one thing I'll throw out there very quickly, though, is that I think there's something else coming that I'm really, frankly, quite excited about. And that's the idea of increasing the granularity that we're going to find in these systems. Today, there's a couple of different systems that are out there in the chemical world that if you search for a particular type of chemical, it can tell you exactly what page, what paragraph. It can pinpoint exactly where that that hit is coming from.
Yep.
And that's something that I haven't seen yet so much from as far as the machine learning tools, that it's here's the document, now it's up to you to sort of figure things out and to determine the relevance on your own. And I think that I've understood from some other folks that there's a time coming where the system will not only say, yes, this is relevant, but this is why it's relevant, and where you should go to look to verify or to determine that, yes, I actually need to utilize this knowledge for something beyond a landscape report, for instance, that I need to use it to come up with a better experimental design, or I need to use this to confirm a freedom to operate opinion. We talked a little bit earlier about that, about the attorneys who are putting their livelihood and their reputation on the line by saying that these documents are actually relevant in a freedom to operate report. And so, it's my understanding that sort of level of granularity is coming, and it's something that I'm really very much looking forward to, because I think that ultimately gets us to a point where it's a semi-supervised, it's a trained model, and that it does an even better job of convincing us of the relevance of what it retrieves, and therefore allows for greater input into the development of the model by being able to do that.
So, Iyad, your inputs on this?
Well, in the case of Focus, we don't do very granular or super specific searches. We're really about mapping out an entire technological domain. And as to Pratik's point earlier, we are trying to expand the usefulness of that data beyond the IP department. So we're working with product managers, for example, to help them make decisions about which technology domain to invest in. And there, for those sorts of purposes, it's not necessary to go into very high degrees of granularity. So I'm not sure where to go there. But yeah, I can really imagine that for more IP specific purposes, that would be super relevant. As to, again, the supervised, the semi-supervised approaches, I just don't see a way around it, because it's just fundamentally true that the relevance of a result depends on your circumstances. So however way you approach the problem, the machine needs to know about your circumstances one way or another, and I don't see a way of making that possible without supervision. Maybe in 10 generations, when we have truly generally intelligent artificial intelligence that can automatically measure all these things about you and your company based on data of the internet or something, maybe then it won't be as necessary, but that is very far into the future, if you ask me.
Thank you. Al, your opinion?
Well, I agree with Tony in that Boolean searches at best are an art, and they rely upon the practitioner to be very knowledgeable in both their process and their technology knowledge in order to obtain an accurate and useful result. And to Tony's point, that oftentimes is not achieved within search results. And one of the main benefits I see with AI is it codifies much of that process and takes the artisanship out of it, and thereby making it a bit more accurate in that way. I think that, again, mirroring what everybody else has said, semi-supervised is requisite. At best, you may be able to plug in, somebody at the very fuzzy front end of innovation that wants to do a novelty search and just see what's softly out there. You might be able to gain some useful knowledge, but it's always going to the results are always going to have to be supervised in order to gain anything useful. And agreeing with Tony, the further insights that we are starting to see in line with why the AIs are pulling out relevant documents, and specifically what portions of those documents get pulled out, adds to the overall utility of the information that we're generating. And I can see in the future, again, how we can utilize the information that's coming out of these initial sort of focused AIs into perhaps other differently beholden AIs to synthesize greater insights. I am not a developer of AI tools, but my sense is that there are different models work specifically better for different applications, and that for me, I worry that how will I apply various models in different ways to achieve the best result across different application spaces. And going to economics, how can I afford to do this with all these different providers? Will there be ultimately a consolidation of algorithms and provision that will allow a suite of AI algorithms to satisfy everything from, strategic conceptualization of, do we want to launch a strategic effort into this field, and what might that look like, through novelty search, FTO, and potential litigation and infringement aspects at the back end. Not to mention portfolio analysis and strategic analysis of products and data and mapping all the patents. There's all this wonderful information out here that none of us could possibly synthesize. And it's very exciting to see how we might do that in the future. I think in the next couple of years, the things that the developers we have here and others will synthesize for us will just make our jobs and our insights that we have much more useful, and the information that we can provide to our clients, whether they be lawyers or internal corporate departments as wherever we work.
Thank you, Al. We move to the future part. So what could be the future of AI and ML? So can it really do something beyond pattern recognition, or search on search side, will it really help us avoid most of the false positives, or take care of the false negatives also, so we'll not miss something that is relevant? And on analysis side, can the computers really do the heuristic or causality kind of analysis? Jitin?
No, I'm a big fan of ideality and ideality of systems. And as we've heard from Altshuler, that things move towards ideality. So I mean, it's not very far away in the future. I think we'll all we'll see it in the next few years or so, that at least the first pass, and more than the first pass, and more than the first pass, would be done by machines. And you will need humans to just kind of make sure that you're not banging into a tree, or you're not hitting into an airport wall. In as far as whatever that the simile for that in patents or AI is concerned. And second, of course, is models that are able to write, create, transpose. Those are the exciting bits, right? We've seen all that with Turing NLP and with BERT models and GPT-3. Those are already things which we are starting to see, and people have started working on, things being written or created or worked upon that way. So we will, of course, look at patterns which are not, recognizable, but then AI will then look at models where it can take those patterns and combine 2 or 3 instances, and then probably come up with some principles to create certain things, or maybe destroy certain things, or destroy novelty for a future, for a possible competitor. So we'll come up with that. I think things will. We're just at the cusp of a very big, a large set of tools coming in, large revolution in terms of AI being in front of us, availability of data being there, computing being easier, creating models being possible. And there's venture capital flowing into this area like anything. So it's a very good area to be in right now. Lots of changes, and I guess it's the patent professionals as well as the R&D professionals who've got to be up and alive to it, because this is going to be one of the defining areas of our careers as we move forward.
Thank you. So let's hear Steve on this.
Yeah, so first of all, just a couple of quick things. So Tony mentioned about the systems that can identify relevant paragraphs within the patent, and that's entirely back to economics. It's an order of magnitude more expensive to classify at that level, which is why it's not really commercially available yet, but it's absolutely coming. And Al mentioned about consolidation of models and tools. I mean, I think that's probably inevitable, just as sort of the way that products and businesses evolve with M&A and mergers and so on. So I think for sure that's going to happen. Although there's some interesting cases there. So I mean, to bring it back to Cypher specifically, we service a portion of the market that hasn't traditionally been provided with tools, which is patent strategists, where previously there wasn't really anything that provided software to that part of the market, because there wasn't anything out there that really helped. So that's kind of a new capability. So to a degree, it doesn't really need to be combined with anything else, or even makes sense to. But I think in general that will definitely happen. At the moment, it's only startups that are developing these new ML models. So everyone's trying to pick off one particular problem and solve that, and there'll be some consolidation in the future for sure. But there's an interesting feedback loop which is happening as we're making new capabilities available to clients. They're discovering new things that they can do with that data that they didn't previously consider. Because if you ignore some, the idea that you might landscape your 100 key technologies every quarter and compare what everyone in your industry is doing, 10 years ago that was just unfeasible. No one could afford to do that, or hardly anyone. Few companies did. Whereas now that's a capability that's available to a huge number of large patent owners. So that kind of sparks new use cases, new ideas. How might we apply that data strategically to help drive our patent strategy and to help ensure that we're spending our budget wisely? And that's driven new capabilities in the system. And there's a kind of really interesting feedback loop of every time we get another round of feedback from clients, we add some more features or some more capabilities, and then they discover new things they can do. So it's certainly an evolving area. But that for me is one of the most exciting things that's happening at the moment. And another one is combining patent data. I think Tony mentioned this earlier, combining patent data with non-patent data. Like for us, it's primarily economic drivers like licensing revenue or product revenue, and then building economic models based on that and the patent data to allow patent strategists to see where they've got challenges and where they've got strengths and how best to capitalize on them. That's kind of a really exciting trend.
Thank you, Steve. So let's go over the team here and see if anybody has additional inputs on how the future looks like.
I have a point that I could make there. I think an idea of where we might go with this, or what we are trying to do at least, is to really take patent data outside of the IP community, right? Patent data, it is a legal representation of a technology, basically. But that also means that you have basically the entire history of human technological development codified in a highly standardized format. So, and we think that you can derive all sorts of interesting conclusions from that don't necessarily apply to IP people, but more to the R&D community. And in terms of what you said earlier with searches or landscapes or whatever you want to call it, that have a 95% precision that is something that we can already do, and I think that's something that Steve would say as well. That is something that they can also already do. So then, basically, what you can do is you can very accurately map out a technological domain, and the question is, do you want to only conclude things about patents within that domain, or can you use those patents to create insights that go beyond the patent domain? And another thing that I think that IP people in general should start thinking about is, every conference that I go to, you always hear IP people asking, why isn't there more IP people at the board level? And I think one of the reasons is because they haven't produced the kind of insights that are required at the board level. But I think with the tools that are available today, and the direction that we are trying to take focus into, you can produce the sorts of strategic insights using patent data that go beyond IP and that are relevant at the board level. So I see a tremendous opportunity for IP people to make themselves relevant beyond the domain of IP, because they have such unique knowledge and insights about patents already. They just need to learn how they can use those same skills to create new insights using the same data that they are already so familiar with.
Al, Pratik, Tony, you want to add something here?
So I would like to say, just take it on throw a little challenge to Van, is that it's not just IP which is relevant in the boardroom, except for in a few areas, right? Except for in some technologies. The important thing to pick up is that decisions get taken on, right, like real world market information on publications or products, or so IP, the universe of IP and its role in decision making is only limited to is only limited, except for a few industries. It's an important input. So when one looks at tools which are being developed for the real world, IP might be a very important part, but for them to be relevant for a decision-making purpose, we'll need to kind of holistically work on not just IP, but combination of IP with other aspects of business, competitive edges, and so on and so forth. And that is when we will find, professionals from within IP making their way to the boardrooms and higher echelons of decision making. And our role is to be the enabler while creating decision making tools, processes, and reports that enable such decisions to be taken, not just within IP, but probably outside of IP, and more real-time input and insights to create more return of investment for our customers and users.
Thank you, Jiten. And anybody else?
Yeah, I'll throw in very briefly. The idea of I'm not a patent attorney. I'm not a patent agent. I'm not actually necessarily all that interested in the legal aspects of patent documents. I do that type of work for clients because, of course, that's what we do. But for me, a patent has always been an economic. It's been a indicator that patents aren't cheap. Patents cost tens of thousands of dollars to file. Nobody files them just to put them on a wall. So for a very long time now, the idea that a patent is a codification of technology and an indicator of economic interest, I think is pretty well established. But what I will say in regards to what we've been talking about today is that I think there's a need for a community, and I've mentioned machine learning for patents.com briefly at the beginning. I won't say a lot about it here, other than to say that it provides an opportunity theoretically to build that community and to share insights. The Cypher folks, for instance, have been highly supportive and have funded the development of training sets and have made material available publicly through GitHub and through open access journal publications. And so it would be amazing and tremendous if we can continue to support the idea of doing this and so I think that can't be understated as far as getting past the concerns that people have and the misconceptions that people have. And so I would just hope that I know everybody on this call has been very supportive of that community, and I'd like to hope that it's going to continue to be the case going forward.
Thinking a little bit about the comments of the role of patent AI in the boardroom, and speaking back to Steve's comments earlier about how M&A and things will consolidate models and the like, I think it's important to remember that patent is certainly not the only place trying to apply machine learning and AI to solving these problems. And to the earlier points, boy, you know, patent analytics is a specifically difficult problem with a relatively small market compared to other big data AI applications. And I've had the good fortune to do a fair amount of strategic patent work in the AI and ML space. And it's evident, as I'm sure you have all seen as well, that there are numerous and proliferate technologies coming out of all fields trying to apply this AI and ML technologies. And similarly, there will be winners and losers therein and a similar consolidation. And I would expect perhaps that knowledge comes out of the patent AI ML space, but it's also likely that it could come from an adjacent space and be combined in a similar way to yield those higher level insights and knowledge in the boardroom, which to Anthony's good point is nobody's getting a patent just to put it on the wall. We're going through this effort, time, treasure, blood, sweat, and tears to realize some economic value. And being able to realize that in the boardroom is ultimately the goal that we want to have here. You know, until that point, we're just sort of enabling that, and we're next to the value stream that, by virtue of being in corporations, we're trying to achieve. And I think we'll see that we'll see those models of AI come together in various ways. But perhaps with a little ego here, I do think that the IP space is a bit more difficult to analyze in a lot of ways. And we all probably have a lot of good insight into strategy as well, as by virtue of dealing with our clients and within our own corporate entities. And I think that being able to combine the knowledge that comes from AI and ML insights and patents with the similar insights that are coming from strategy, markets, and other places will give the patent practitioner of AI and ML a bit of an advantage, perhaps, in that scenario, in synthesizing greater information and leading to intelligent strategic decisions that are based upon AI and ML insights from different models in different spaces.
Great, thank you. Any last comment by anybody?
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, Steve. Yeah, Steve, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that just in case anyone's in any doubt, that there's no AI currently on the market which is proposing strategies that you might follow. It's merely just automating the collection of data, and there are systems working on the drafting of patents or suggesting technologies that you might combine in order to get a patentable material. But that's about the sort of cutting edge. So it's not about trying to do the job of a patent strategist or do the job of a patent searcher. It's merely about giving them better data more quickly, more cheaply today.
Yeah, Pratik?
Right. No, so before the call, so before the panel discussion today, so my perspective around this was built around, basic information that I had in terms of there's so many patent analytics and patent searching tools out there. You're trying to use AI and solving various different problems. But if you look at on the patent monetization or the evaluation side of it, or there aren't too many out there doing something very similar or jostling for space there. And the primary reason that I thought behind that was, that there is a difference in terms of the data that goes behind it. The patent analytics, you're talking more about quantitative information which is available. Whereas on the patent monetization or licensing side, you need both qualitative and quantitative information. And that was what my perspective was before this panel discussion today. And it is good to hear from all of you that, there are things happening. There are economics, causing delay or sort of pushing this back. So that's good to know, and that's good to know that all of this is there, and that sort of gives me more confidence in understanding that this is the right trend going forward. And as Jitin mentioned, this is a very critical part of where our journey is right now. So that's really good to know, and that panel discussion really helped me understand that.
Great. Yeah, it was a great learning, really from all of you. At the end of the discussion, I really feel that we will get something really beyond pattern recognition from AI and ML, and near in future that we will start getting insights from AI and ML, if not the strategies. So thank you for being here, and sharing your thoughts with the audience here. There, thank you.